think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations.
In the world of royalty, every glance, every whisper, and every word carries weight. Behind the palace gates, where tradition meets tension, an unexpected storm brews. When Queen Camilla allegedly mocked Catherine, Princess of Wales, during her fragile battle with illness, the ripples spread far beyond Buckingham Palace. Yet what truly shocked observers was not only Camilla's remark, but Princess Anne's uncharacteristically fierce reaction. The woman, known for her stoic composure and unshakable discipline, was visibly unsettled. What unfolded behind closed doors has since captivated the nation and the world. This is the story of loyalty, rivalry, and royal survival. The royal divide, setting the scene. The British royal family has always been a fascinating spectacle, a living institution where history, duty, and personal relationships are in constant tension. From the outside, the monarchy often projects unity, ceremony, and tradition. But beneath that polished surface lies a complex web of rivalries, loyalties, and quiet conflicts. To understand the significance of Princess Anne's reaction to Camilla's words about Catherine, one must first appreciate the fractures that already existed within the House of Windsor. The royal family is not merely a family, it is a stage where every move is judged by the world. The reign of King Charles III has only amplified the microscope. Following Queen Elizabeth II's passing, the monarchy faced both transition and turbulence. Charles sought to cement his authority and modernize the crown's image, but doing so meant navigating deep family divisions. Prince Harry and Meghan's departure created visible cracks. Public trust shifted, the younger generation began to reshape the monarchy's future, and all eyes increasingly turned to Prince William and Catherine as symbols of stability. In this environment, Camilla's place as queen consort became a source of both acceptance and skepticism. For decades, she had been a polarizing figure tied to the history of Charles's marriage to Diana. While she eventually won a measure of public acceptance, many still viewed her with caution, doubting whether she could ever embody the grace and dignity expected of a queen. Catherine, in contrast, emerged as the people's favorite, a future queen beloved for her composure, dedication, and gentle humanity. She represented continuity with Diana's legacy, yet she carved out her own role as a modern royal, devoted to causes like mental health, early childhood development, and community service. For the public, she was the perfect counterbalance to the controversies surrounding the crown. Within this delicate balance, tensions simmered quietly. The monarchy's image relied heavily on Catherine's presence, her health, and her ability to continue supporting William in his role as heir. When Catherine's illness surfaced, the entire nation held its breath. Rumors swirled, speculation mounted, and the palace released carefully measured statements to reassure the public. Catherine's vulnerability placed her in a new light, no longer just the serene duchess turned princess, but a woman facing real human struggles. It was against this backdrop that Camilla's alleged mocking remark struck such a nerve. What may have been intended as a passing comment or private jest carried implications far beyond its moment. It tapped into the enduring unease many felt about Camilla's role and reopened old wounds tied to Diana's memory, but perhaps most revealing was Princess Anne's reaction. Known for her reserved demeanor, Anne has rarely shown visible emotion in public. She embodies the monarchy's spirit of duty above all else. For her to respond with visible shock and disapproval hinted at something deeper, an acknowledgement that a line had been crossed, not just against Catherine, but against the dignity of the monarchy itself. The divide within the royal household was no longer just private. It had become a story impossible to ignore. Catherine's illness, a nation holds its breath. When the news of Catherine, Princess of Wales' illness quietly surfaced, it was not delivered with the thunder of a palace announcement, but with the carefully measured restraint that has become characteristic of the monarchy. The palace spoke in vague terms, choosing its words with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, enough to acknowledge concern, but never enough to open the floodgates of speculation. Yet, as always, the silence between the lines spoke louder than the official statements. For the British public, Catherine has long represented more than just William's wife or the future queen. She is a symbol of stability, someone who seems to bear the crushing weight of duty with grace and humanity. Where others in the royal circle have stumbled, Catherine has endured. Where scandals have eroded trust, she has rebuilt it through quiet resilience. So when whispers began circulating about her health, the nation leaned forward, desperate for answers. The press, as expected, seized the opportunity with ferocity. Tabloid headlines speculated wildly, some claiming exhaustion, others suggesting more serious conditions. Paparazzi lenses lingered longer on her rare public appearances, analyzing every detail: the slight pallor of her face, the way she held her posture, the subtle moments of fatigue. To the ordinary eye, she looked composed, but to a watchful public, every gesture seemed to carry hidden meaning. And yet, beneath the frenzy of speculation, there was an undeniable wave of compassion. Unlike other royals who have drawn mixed reactions in times of vulnerability, Catherine's struggles were met with near universal sympathy. Perhaps it was because she has never sought to dominate the spotlight. Her approach has been one of service, meeting people quietly, championing causes without fanfare, embodying a kind of modern grace that felt authentic in a world often clouded by artifice. For many, she had become the face of the monarchy's future, a mother, a leader, and a symbol of continuity after Queen Elizabeth II. It is precisely this bond with the public that made her illness so unsettling. The nation was not just worried for her as a royal figure, but as a human being they felt they knew. For William, the pressure mounted. He carried on with royal duties, but there was a visible heaviness to his presence, as though the strain of protecting both his wife and his role as heir was pulling him in two directions. His loyalty to Catherine was unquestionable, but as with all heirs to the throne, duty to the crown left little room for personal retreat. Inside the palace walls, the atmosphere was tense. Catherine's health had become more than a personal matter. It was now a question of national stability. The monarchy had weathered scandals, divorces, and departures, but a health crisis of someone so central to its future posed an entirely different challenge. Every whisper about Catherine's condition carried the weight of history. Every glance at William hinted at the fragility of succession. And just as the public rallied around her, one comment from Queen Camilla would strike the most unexpected blow, one that would not only wound Catherine's dignity but ignite Princess Anne's fierce sense of loyalty. Camilla's growing influence. Camilla Parker. Bowles's journey from reviled outsider to queen consort has been one of the most remarkable and controversial transformations in royal history. For decades, she was cast in the shadow of scandal, forever tied to the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage. To the public, she was once the other woman, whispered about in disapproving tones, a figure whose very presence seemed to threaten the fairy tale image of the monarchy. And yet, against all odds, Camilla endured. Through the passage of time, quiet persistence, and Charles's unwavering devotion, she not only reclaimed her position, but stepped into the very heart of the crown itself. When Charles ascended the throne following the demise of Queen Elizabeth, Camilla's title changed forever. No longer consort-in-waiting or future princess, she was crowned queen alongside her husband. The coronation, while celebrated by some, was met with unease by others. There were cheers, yes, but also silent frowns. Even as she took her place at the king's side, there lingered a question. Had the public truly forgiven, or had they simply grown tired of resisting? Inside palace walls, however, Camilla's influence became undeniable. Charles, long seen as sensitive and sometimes indecisive, leaned heavily on her counsel. She knew his moods, his weaknesses, and his ambitions better than anyone. Courtiers, once skeptical of her presence, began to acknowledge her authority. Subtle though her power may have been, it was woven into the fabric of the king's daily life. To question Camilla was, in many ways, to question Charles himself. But influence comes at a price. Camilla's ascent created ripples of unease among other royals, particularly those who had worked tirelessly to maintain the crown's dignity. Princess Anne, who had dedicated her life to duty with little fanfare or complaint, viewed Camilla's rise with pragmatic caution. While Anne rarely voiced personal opinions, her silence often spoke volumes. To her, service was not about charm or spin, it was about discipline, resilience, and the hard, unglamorous work of showing up. Camilla, in contrast, seemed to wield a softer, subtler power. She cultivated her own network of allies, charmed her way into circles of influence, and learned to use wit as both shield and weapon. She was never the cold, aloof figure some had imagined, but nor was she entirely deferential. Camilla knew how to play the long game, and she had played it brilliantly, yet her very strength was also her greatest vulnerability. Every word, every gesture carried with it the risk of misinterpretation. In moments of levity, her humor could appear biting. What she intended as casual remarks sometimes landed as cruel. And when those words touched Catherine, the beloved Princess of Wales, the consequences were explosive. Camilla's growing influence was not just about her position beside the king. It was about how she reshaped the balance of power within the family itself. To some, she had become a stabilizing partner to Charles. To others, she remained an interloper, a reminder of past wounds that had never fully healed. In this fragile environment, one mocking comment, whether intended in jest or not, would tip the balance from uneasy acceptance into open tension and set Princess Anne against her in a way no one had anticipated. The mocking incident. It was during a private gathering, one of those moments the palace never intended to escape its gilded walls, that the remark was said to have surfaced. The royals had gathered informally, away from the flash of cameras, away from the relentless eye of the press. These occasions, though discreet, were far from relaxed. Every interaction still carried undertones of hierarchy, unspoken rivalries, and the silent choreography of who stood where, who spoke first, and who listened longest. In such settings, even laughter could be laced with sharpness. Catherine had been the subject of quiet concern that day. Though not present herself, choosing rest over appearances, her absence hung heavy in the room. Discussions of her health were inevitable. The Princess of Wales was not just a wife and mother, she was the future queen consort, the woman on whose shoulders much of the monarchy's public goodwill rested. Any mention of her well-being was bound to ripple through the family like a chill wind. It was then, according to whispers later carried beyond palace gates, that Camilla let her words slip. With a tone half amused, half dismissive, she allegedly made a remark that seemed to belittle Catherine's condition. Whether it was meant as a careless joke, a sign of frustration at the sympathy Catherine was receiving, or simply an attempt at dry humor, no one can say for certain. What matters is how it was heard. To those in the room, the words carried a sting, an insinuation that Catherine's illness was being exaggerated, or that her absence was more inconvenience than tragedy. The reaction was immediate, though restrained. Courtiers avoided eye contact, conversation shifted awkwardly, and the moment threatened to dissolve into silence. But it was Princess Anne who broke that silence, not with words, but with the unmistakable sharpness of her gaze. Known throughout her life for discipline and duty, Anne had rarely allowed herself to show emotion in such settings. Yet witnesses described her as visibly bristling, her shock registering in the set of her jaw and the steel in her eyes. To Anne, Catherine was not just William's wife. She was a woman who had embraced the grind of royal life with remarkable grace, who had shown deference to tradition while modernizing its image, and who had won the respect of the nation without scandal or complaint. For Camilla to mock Catherine in her moment of vulnerability struck at something far deeper than etiquette. It touched the very heart of loyalty, dignity, and respect for the crown's future. What might have passed as a throwaway comment in another setting became, in this charged atmosphere, an affront. And because it came from the queen consort herself, it carried the weight of authority and the shadow of betrayal. From that moment, the tension was no longer hidden. A line had been crossed, and those present knew the fallout could not be contained forever. For in the royal family, private words rarely stay private for long. Princess Anne's fierce loyalty. Princess Anne has always been the monarchy's quiet warrior. Nicknamed the hardest-working royal, She has spent decades attending hundreds of engagements each year, rarely seeking headlines, never courting drama. Her reputation is built not on glamour but on grit, and in a family where appearances often dominate, Anne has earned respect for her substance. She does not waste words, she does not play games, and when something unsettles her, it is felt without her needing to speak. In the aftermath of Camilla's remark, Anne's loyalty to Catherine became impossible to ignore. The younger princess had impressed her from the start. Catherine, though thrust into royal life through marriage, embraced her duties with a discipline that resonated with Anne's own ethos. She did not complain publicly. She did not rebel against expectations. Instead, she quietly adapted, learning the ropes of royal service with patience and grace. To Anne, Catherine represented the kind of steady presence the monarchy desperately needed. So when Camilla's words seemed to cast doubt on Catherine's illness, Anne bristled. For her, this was not simply a matter of family tension. It was a question of principle. In Anne's eyes, mocking a woman who had given so much of herself to the crown while facing a personal health battle was unforgivable. And while Anne did not lash out with dramatic outbursts, her displeasure was unmistakable. Those who know her describe the way her eyes narrow, the way her silence sharpens the air, making even the most confident voices falter. At that moment, she was Catherine's silent defender. Behind palace walls, Anne's response carried weight. Unlike others, she has no fear of losing favor, no hunger for influence. Her position is secure, defined not by ambition but by unwavering service. She has long been known to speak frankly in private, even to her brother the king, and her opinion cannot be easily dismissed. Those who witnessed her shock at Camilla's words understood it as more than a personal reaction, it was a warning. For Anne, loyalty is not an abstract concept. It is the foundation of the monarchy itself. The royal family survives because its members stand together, presenting unity in the face of scrutiny. When cracks appear, the institution trembles, and when those cracks are widened by careless words from within, it endangers everything the crown stands for. In defending Catherine, Anne was defending the monarchy's integrity. Outside the palace, this fierce loyalty resonated with the public. Though Anne rarely makes headlines, her protective stance reminded people why she commands such respect. She was not defending Catherine for sympathy's sake. She was standing guard over the future of the crown. In a world where perception is power, Anne's reaction signaled that Camilla's influence was not absolute, and that some traditions of honor and respect were non-negotiable. In that quiet but pointed moment, Anne made it clear: Catherine was not alone. And for Camilla, the queen consort, whose power was built on a delicate balance of acceptance, Anne's disapproval was a formidable shadow, one that would not easily fade. Behind palace walls, tensions boil over. The royal family is often compared to a stage, but in truth it is more like a fortress, stone walls that hide a world of whispered alliances, subtle rivalries, and unspoken hierarchies. To the public, the monarchy presents itself as united, draped in tradition and ceremony. But behind those walls, the atmosphere is rarely serene. After Camilla's mocking remark about Catherine, the fortress shook. What had begun as a private exchange quickly became the spark for broader unease. Courtiers, ever watchful, sensed the shift immediately. In royal households, staff are trained to read the air, to notice the smallest change in tone, posture, or glance. Princess Anne's visible shock did not go unnoticed. Neither did the awkward silence that followed Camilla's words. In a family where everything is managed for appearances, even silence is dangerous. It carries messages that no official statement can erase. Word began to circulate, not through formal reports, but through the murmurs of staff who could not help but share what they had witnessed. A sideways comment here, a lowered voice there, and soon the story spread within palace corridors. Camilla's influence had grown powerful since Charles's coronation, but with influence came scrutiny. Every remark, every gesture was amplified. And this particular remark struck at the heart of the monarchy's delicate balance. Catherine, the woman many saw as the crown's future anchor, had been mocked at her most vulnerable. Inside, the tension began to divide loyalties. Some courtiers, aligned with the king and queen consort, downplayed the incident. They described it as harmless humor, nothing more than Camilla's sharp tongue getting the better of her. Others, however, felt a quiet unease. Anne's reaction lingered in their minds, as did the knowledge that Catherine's popularity with the public far exceeded Camilla's. To appear unsympathetic to Catherine was to risk alienating the very people the monarchy depended on for survival. William, though not present when the words were spoken, felt the ripple effect as reports reached him. Known for his protective devotion to Catherine, he found himself in an impossible position. On one hand, confronting Camilla could strain his relationship with his father, the king. On the other, ignoring the insult risked appearing indifferent to his wife's dignity. The palace thrives on discretion, but William understood too well. Nothing inside those walls stays hidden forever. As tension thickened, palace life became even more carefully choreographed. Joint appearances were scrutinized. Subtle gaps in body language, slight delays in greetings, or the absence of a smile became material for speculation. Staff briefings took on a sharper edge, with advisors reminding everyone that unity was paramount. Yet the very reminder betrayed how fragile that unity had become. Behind closed doors, the monarchy's greatest strength, its aura of unshakable stability, was faltering. A careless remark had exposed just how brittle the crown's image could be. For centuries, the royal family has survived wars, scandals, and upheaval, but its greatest battles have often been internal. This was one of them, and as whispers spread beyond the palace, the public would soon sense the storm brewing behind those ancient walls. The public's reaction. When whispers of Camilla's alleged remark about Catherine finally reached the outside world, they carried with them an electric charge. The British public, already protective of the Princess of Wales, responded with a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. For years, Catherine had been the monarchy's most admired figure, praised for her composure, her warmth, and her tireless work. The idea that she had been mocked in her time of illness struck many as cruel, even heartless. The press, of course, seized the story instantly. Tabloid front pages printed bold headlines suggesting palace tension. Columnists debated what had truly been said and what it revealed about the balance of power in the monarchy. Some newspapers chose caution, framing the incident as a clash of personalities. Others went further, painting Camilla as out of touch and unkind, contrasting her sharply with Catherine's image as the devoted wife and mother battling through personal hardship. Social media, however, left little room for nuance. Platforms like X and Instagram filled with hashtags such as #StandWithCatherine and #ColdCamilla. Users shared old photos of Diana alongside new ones of Catherine, drawing parallels between past and present, between two women beloved by the public but overshadowed by the monarchy's politics. Memes appeared overnight, some satirical, others biting, portraying Camilla as dismissive while casting Catherine as the silent heroine of the royal story. Yet not everyone saw it as black and white. Some defenders of Camilla argued that the queen consort's humor had always been dry, even sardonic, and that what she intended as lightness had been misinterpreted in the retelling. They pointed out that Camilla herself had endured years of public vilification and that her resilience was often misunderstood as coldness. Still, these voices were drowned out by the sheer force of sympathy for Catherine. Public sentiment matters deeply to the monarchy. Its survival rests not on law but on loyalty, on the belief that the crown represents stability, dignity, and service. When the public feels betrayed, the institution trembles. And in this moment, Catherine's vulnerability made her untouchable in the eyes of the people. The thought that she might have been treated with insensitivity from within the family itself was not just a scandal, it was a betrayal of trust. In pubs, workplaces, and households across Britain, conversations turned to the story. Some spoke with disappointment, others with outrage, but few dismissed it as unimportant. Catherine's illness had already humanized her in a way few royals experience. Now, this alleged insult elevated her further, casting her as both victim and survivor. For Camilla, however, the fallout was swift. Whatever the intent behind her words, the perception had hardened. She had mocked the nation's princess at her weakest moment. In the theater of monarchy, perception is often more powerful than reality. The public had chosen its side, and it was not with the queen consort. The divide between palace and people was widening, and the monarchy once again found itself at the mercy of public opinion. Royal image at risk. The British monarchy has survived wars, divorces, abdications, and scandals, but its greatest threat has always been the slow erosion of public trust. In the wake of the alleged mocking remark, the royal household faced a dilemma it knew well. The story was not just about family dynamics, it was about perception. Every photograph, every headline, every rumor could chip away at the fragile image of unity that kept the institution afloat. Catherine had become the monarchy's most reliable anchor. For years, her steady hand and quiet dignity had balanced the turbulence of Harry and Meghan's departure, the controversies surrounding Prince Andrew, and even the anxieties of Charles's transition to the throne. She was, in many ways, the face of reassurance. The public saw in her a figure they could trust, someone who represented continuity, stability, and a kind of unassuming grace. To mock her illness, even privately, was to undermine not just Catherine, but the crown's credibility itself. Within palace strategy meetings, the concern was palpable. Advisors knew the monarchy's strength lay not in authority, but in symbolism. If the public saw the Queen Consort as insensitive, and the Princess of Wales as a victim of disrespect within her own family, the damage could spread like wildfire. For centuries, the crown's power rested on the illusion of unity. Without it, cracks became fault lines. The press fed the fire. Opinion pieces questioned whether Camilla's influence was destabilizing rather than steadying. Commentators contrasted her sharpness with Catherine's warmth, warning that the monarchy could not afford to alienate its most beloved figure. International outlets picked up the story too, painting it as yet another example of the palace failing to protect its women, echoing themes that had haunted the crown since Diana's demise. Even small details began to take on outsized meaning. When Catherine appeared in public, looking pale but smiling, her photographs were splashed across front pages as symbols of resilience. When Camilla attended engagements, her expressions were dissected for signs of defensiveness or indifference. The monarchy, once skilled at controlling its narrative, now seemed caught in a storm where every image deepened the contrast between the two women. Princess Anne's visible disapproval had only reinforced the seriousness of the incident. Anne was not known for theatrics. If she had bristled, then surely the remark had been as cutting as reported. Her silent defense of Catherine became its own narrative, an image of loyalty within the family that only highlighted the Queen Consort's misstep. For King Charles, the moment was precarious. His reign was still young and his authority was vulnerable. He needed both Catherine's popularity and Camilla's support to stabilize the monarchy. Yet the fallout from one careless comment risked turning allies into adversaries and reshaping the family's public image at its very core. The monarchy had always relied on carefully controlled appearances, but now its reputation was at the mercy of public perception. And perception, once fractured, is almost impossible to repair. Anne versus Camilla, a cold rivalry? The relationship between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla has always been one of careful civility. But beneath the polished smiles and formal greetings, there lies a history shaped by contrasting personalities, rival priorities, and the unspoken weight of the past. In the aftermath of the mocking remark, their differences were no longer subtle. They became a cold current running through palace corridors. Anne has always been the embodiment of duty. From her earliest years, she accepted her role with stoic discipline, rarely indulging in the privileges of royalty and instead throwing herself into service. While others sought glamour, Anne preferred hard work. She was the royal who showed up in muddy boots at equestrian events, who endured endless engagements without complaint, who spoke bluntly when others circled around the truth. For her, loyalty to the crown was not negotiable. It was the very fabric of her existence. Camilla's path was markedly different. She did not grow up within the same crucible of expectation. Instead, she navigated her way into the royal fold through love, persistence, and resilience. Her influence came not from tradition, but from personal connection with Charles. Where Anne valued duty, Camilla relied on charm. Where Anne was sharp-edged and uncompromising, Camilla was softer in tone but capable of wielding wit like a dagger. Theirs were two different survival strategies in the same unforgiving institution. The alleged insult toward Catherine crystallized their divide. To Anne, mocking a woman who had borne the weight of expectation with dignity was more than just poor taste. It was an offense against the values she held sacred. She viewed Catherine as an ally, someone who understood the grind of duty and carried it with grace. Camilla's comment, whether careless or intentional, exposed a lack of respect that Anne could not ignore. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. During public appearances, the space between them seemed wider, their exchanges cooler. Observers noted Anne's clipped tone when Camilla was present, her tendency to gravitate toward others in the room rather than engage directly. It was not open hostility, but the kind of restrained disapproval that only Anne could deliver, a quiet signal that trust had been fractured. Camilla, for her part, was no stranger to cold shoulders. She had endured far worse from the public and from Diana loyalists within the family. But Anne's disapproval was different. Anne carried a moral authority that Camilla could never claim. She had spent decades in service, earning a respect so deeply rooted that it did not require titles or crowns. To be silently opposed by Anne was to stand against the very embodiment of royal duty. In many ways, the rivalry between the two women was not about Catherine alone. It was about the soul of the monarchy. Was it to be defined by unyielding discipline and tradition, as Anne believed, or by adaptability and personal influence, as Camilla represented? The mocking incident had merely sharpened the lines of an old divide, and now, with the public watching closely, neither woman could afford to falter. The future of the monarchy. The British monarchy has always been a paradox, ancient yet fragile, revered yet questioned, bound by tradition yet forced to evolve. Every generation faces its own tests, and for King Charles's reign, the mocking incident between Camilla and Catherine has become more than a family quarrel. It is a mirror reflecting the monarchy's deepest challenge: how to survive in an age where unity is its last great currency and perception its most precious shield. Catherine's illness had already placed the crown under strain. She is not only the wife of the heir, but the monarchy's most visible bridge to the future. For many, she represents the balance between tradition and modern relevance, embodying Diana's compassion while bringing her own quiet strength. Any attack on her, whether real or perceived, is felt as an attack on the people's trust in the royal family. That is why Camilla's alleged remark reverberated so far beyond palace walls. It was not merely about Catherine's health, it was about the monarchy's ability to honor the dignity of its own members. Princess Anne's defense of Catherine only deepened the significance. Anne, respected for her decades of unflinching service, symbolized the voice of tradition within the family. By standing with Catherine, even silently, she aligned herself with the values that have long held the monarchy together: loyalty, discipline, and respect for duty. The clash between Anne and Camilla, therefore, was not just personal. It was emblematic of two competing visions for the crown's survival. As the story leaked into headlines, the royal household scrambled to manage the fallout. Carefully staged appearances were orchestrated, placing William and Catherine in sympathetic light, while Charles and Camilla projected solidarity. Yet the subtle choreography could not disguise the fracture. The more the palace tried to project unity, the more the public scrutinized every glance, every gesture, every silence. The monarchy's image was once again at the mercy of interpretation. The long-term implications are profound. For William, the incident underscored the delicate line he must walk as future king. His loyalty to Catherine is unwavering, but his duty to the crown requires him to maintain peace with his stepmother and father. For Catherine, it reinforced her role as both symbol and survivor, beloved by the public, but vulnerable to the politics of the institution she married into. For Camilla, it was a stark reminder that despite her crown, her acceptance remains conditional, always compared to the woman who came before her and the woman who will come after. And for Anne, it was a moment that revealed the quiet power she still holds. By reacting, she reminded the world that the monarchy is not only about thrones and titles, but about the principles that sustain them. The future of the monarchy now hinges on whether it can heal its fractures or whether the cracks will deepen into divides. One mocking remark may seem small, but in the kingdom of crowns and symbols, small things can move empires. The question remains, will the monarchy adapt and endure, or will its own divisions mark the beginning of its decline? In the centuries-long story of the British monarchy, words have often carried as much weight as crowns. What began as a single remark, perhaps careless, perhaps intentional, has rippled outward into questions of loyalty, perception, and survival. Catherine, in her quiet dignity, emerged not only as a figure of sympathy, but as a symbol of resilience. Anne, the ever-steadfast Princess Royal, reminded the world that honor and duty remain the monarchy's most unshakable pillars. And Camilla, now Queen Consort, found herself at the center of a storm that revealed both her influence and her vulnerability. As the monarchy steps into an uncertain future, one truth becomes clear. Its survival depends not merely on ceremony, but on the trust of the people. In the theater of royalty, perception is power, and every word, every silence, every gesture can shape history. What do you think about this story? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories behind the crown.